Welcome back to SHAM-ROCKIN, the show that uncovers what's moving, breaking, shaking, or bottlenecking the manufacturing world. I'm Lily Ferrer, and I'm here with John Casey, and today's topic is whack-a-mole, the game that costs you over and over and over again. So, John, I know the game. The mole pops up, you smack it down. Another one pops up, you smack it down, and it goes on, and you just never win. You just get tired and frustrated. Do you remember that game?
I do, and that's what I think is the irony of the phrase whack-a-mole. Because as a kid, and my mom can attest to this, she would say, go play with the other kids, and I never got the game because it never really ends. You don't move to another level, or you don't seem to get rewarded for any of that behavior, and it's kind of, I think, what we're looking at in business today. It's very similar. And if you take that to a business setting, there is an addiction to chaos. That is a real thing, and people are addicted to the activities that release dopamine and adrenaline and cortisol. Those are the pleasure chemicals in your brain, and I think it's especially prevalent and dangerous in the manufacturing and supply chain world. This addiction causes an approach that really, I believe, causes most of the issues, or is at least related to most of the issues in the industry.
How so?
Well, and again, I call it whack-a-mole, and it's just heavily involved in manufacturing. Let me give you an example. So I stroll into a business the other day. Won't, because I'm sure our customers probably watching, but I stroll into a business, and the supervisors are literally running around on the floor, and the operators are standing there, and some of them, are even kind of throwing their arms up in the air, and the managers can't figure out why this day is off to yet another poor start. And really, it took a couple minutes. All of it was caused by poor planning. So I think my question to our listeners is, do you ever feel like you're fixing problems day after day, week after week? Does it seem like there's similar problems to those your team has had before? I frequently see this. I see it upwards of, it's mind-boggling, between other people on my team and myself. I see it or hear it upwards of 25 times a week.
I can imagine. I mean, there are phrases that we hear all the time. In addition to the whack-a-mole vision, there's running on a treadmill, running on a hamster mill, kind of reiterates what you're trying to say about getting in that loop and not getting off successfully necessarily. And then you get addicted to that. Right? So the question I want to ask you, though, is, isn't that just manufacturing? Isn't that just how manufacturing is?
Not the manufacturing I know. Yes, do I hear that all the time? I hear that all the time. And it just hasn't been our experience, or certainly my experience. I've run operations in manufacturing, and that hasn't been the experience I've had. What I hear from folks, though, is something breaks and we slap a temporary fix on it. I hear that at more than half of the places we work with. If you have a quality issue, we wrap pretty paper on it. If we have a communication problem, and communication, by the way, comes up more often than any other subject on engagement surveys and people surveys. And the fix to that is to communicate more, talk more. That's generally not what people are asking you for. We'll get to that in a minute. The example I mentioned a minute ago, was simple poor planning. If they'd had a real plan, they did have an idea, but that idea was doomed from the start. If they just slowed down, figured out what the best asset to run that on was, they would have eliminated most of their problems for that day. And they obviously would have had a much better day. I think sites react. Instead of being proactive, they're very reactive. Instead of planning, they chase symptoms. Instead of solving causes. And the leaders, too often they feel, like you said, that this is normal. This is what we're supposed to be doing, and they treat problems just like that. And sometimes they'll just pull a solution out of a catalog. And there's many stories. One of my more interesting stories was I came upon this guy. We were doing an assessment for a customer, and I come upon this employee, and they're standing there, and there's literally boxes going around a corner. And so boxes are very top heavy when they're on a conveyor belt, and they tend to tip over. They're vertical boxes, and this employee's standing there, and they're kind of bumping the boxes with their hand as they go around that corner. And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, if I'm not here, the boxes fall off. There is something in the business called a guardrail. They're less than $100 for that particular line to install a guardrail. The best part of that story is I said, well, sir, how long have you been standing here? He'd been doing that job 40 hours a week for 4 months.
Wow.
That had been his job. And the worst part of that story, I saw that same activity in 3 different factories for 3 different companies in less than a year, really, about a year and a half.
Wow.
That's not less than a year,
You
but
can
about a
really,
year and a half.
you can really equate that to money, like we did before, money flying out the door.
That costs you money. Yeah, literally, if you just do a basic comparison, and again, I think that's something a CEO or COO who watches this, or VP of Ops should be doing in their head, being going, wait a minute, what did that cost me? Not to mention how, by the way, demoralizing to an employee that is, and to the rest of the people on that line, to the human being aspect of it. But from a business standpoint, the cost of that, instead of spending $90 or whatever on a guardrail, right, to have a guardrail put in there, you're spending, I don't even know what 4 months comes out to be, but it's probably at least $10,000.
It's more than $100, yeah.
It's more than $100, yeah.
Yeah. So why does whack-a-mole leadership fail?
Because it's back to the basics. It has no process. And so to me, running any business, but certainly running manufacturing, is all around process and behavior and process. And I think what happens is people abandon the process for a variety of reasons. And then when you get stuck in that whack-a-mole positioning, right, you're burning time, you're burning money, and then it creates more pressure. And so I think what happens, if you go back to that, the concept of mindset that people have, that we have to hurry, we have to rush, we have to hurry, we have to rush, and you get stuck in that's let's slap a fix on it and then move on, and let's slap a fix on it and move on. And all the fixes have issues. There's fallout from them.
Okay.
And to the business, that's what I think is important to a lot of the folks watching this, is that connects back to your business. Now you have endless downtime. So you're chasing downtime. You're constantly saying, why is my downtime 10% or 20% or even higher, 25 and 30% if we're using real downtime numbers, right? The operators become disengaged because no one seems to fix the issues. They feel like, at this point, they're starting to feel like no one's listening to them. We run into that in over 90% of the businesses that we go into. The folks feel like, well, they don't listen to us anyway. And then they lose the employees' trust. We've got these Band-Aids, and again, it just becomes a pretty vicious cycle. And the longer you play the game, the more expensive it gets.
Okay. So I imagine there are plans, there are processes, there are SOPs already in place. A pet peeve of mine is you can have a plan, but if you don't execute it, it's not worth anything.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I think what happens is that if you don't give people we mentioned this previously in a different episode, that the why behind the what. If you only tell me, here's this piece of paper, here's our plan, go execute it, and I don't really get the why behind it, maybe I sort of do, you're going to get a sort of result.
Okay.
The more I get why we're actually doing this, the more engaged I am, the more productive I'm going to be, the more likely I am going to be to follow your plan or give you feedback on why that plan may not work. That's the simple reality of it.
Okay, that
Back
makes
to the
sense.
why behind the what.
Okay, so before we started today, and I think even a little bit earlier, you mentioned the catalog problem, the catalog solution. What is that?
So what I've seen, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, is leaders are grabbing these prepackaged answers off the shelf, or the shelf being the internet today, right? Or they're seeing something on LinkedIn and somebody else tried, or somebody in a different division tried something, so that must be the answer to our problem. And so they're grabbing these prepackaged catalog ideas. They're treating it more like an IKEA order than really diagnosing what's going on in your business and developing a solution to what's going on in your business.
Okay.
So, take communication. As I mentioned earlier, the frequent solution to it is to talk more.
It is.
But the foundation of good communication isn't there. The number one thing, the most important piece, is to listen. Then you want to talk about getting clarity and accountability. But first and foremost, folks again feel I have to speak to you because the communication they get feedback that says, oh, the communication's lacking, so they go out and they talk more. They do a town hall and they talk more at people. People want you to listen more.
Okay.
Then we can get into clarity and not stop making assumptions.
Okay. So, what are some other real world examples of whack-a-mole thinking that our listeners might appreciate?
Oh, if we're talking manufacturing, the easiest one is machine breakdowns. It just seems like, I can go back 20 years. Some of the examples of the machine goes down, they'd be in a meeting, an important meeting, and everyone would just get up and walk out to the floor to suddenly fix the machine. A lot of times we end up with what they call it maintenance duct tapes, a temporary fix. And the line starts running, leadership applauds that behavior, which is, by the way, wrong, because now you're reinforcing that that's what we should be doing going forward. 2 weeks later, boom, we have the same problem. Worse this time, a problem that's going to cause even more downtime. There's not something, we call it a breakdown elimination process. I wonder if the listeners see it. And if they see it, because I do every week. Another one is certainly the high turnover that we've talked about, right? The mole pops up. Leadership reacts by dangling a quick perk, right? Well, we'll just respond to what people are saying instead of listening to what they're actually saying, or respond to what they're saying now, and we'll try and fix that problem for them. Maybe we'll give them some token, recognition. And for a while, people smile, and then the problem pops back up again. That's whack-a-mole. That's literally whack-a-mole. So one of the biggest solutions, you go back to COVID, for example, with employee turnover, it obviously escalated very quickly, and 100% of the companies that I was looking at were saying they had this $2 solution. If we give people $2 an hour more, they're all going to be happy and satisfied.
And they were?
It didn't work. Because 6 months later, they wanted another $2. Well, if you gave me $2 before, maybe you'll give me another $2. That's psychology. You're creating the wrong expectations, and you're not fixing what was the real problem in the first place. Listening to what the employees were really talking about in the first place. Another area, safety incidents, UG. A lot of us don't want to talk about it, but the accidents happen, and then we go and we fix something. My question is simple: why didn't we see this before the accident? Why do we wait until the accident happens and then do something about it? I mentioned my background, years and years ago in the fire service, and that was very prevalent in the fire service. They would wait to enact a law. We would see an issue, but they would wait to enact a law until we had a catastrophic event. And then suddenly, now it's okay, now the environment's right to bring about a law.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've seen in the past in my working in organizations. An emergency happens, everybody comes together at the same time, and you fix it. Sometimes a really good fix if it's the result of an emergency. And then managers ask, well, why can't my employees operate like that all the time? They go back to being on the hamster wheel, doing what they know, ignoring the problems.
So, before I get into maybe even just the basic aesthetics of it, I think that it's mindset. I think you have to begin with mindset. The Center for Creative Leadership has a really simple, basic model for it around thoughts, feelings, behaviors, results. I think if we don't get into that mindset, you're right. We're just gonna be addicted to going back and getting our fix. I think past the mindset, just really having a plan. So many folks that we work with in manufacturing, they're set up to be reactive. I know when I've gone and run a plant, that's one of the common pieces I get from folks at plants. They say, well, we can't have a schedule. Like literally being a plant manager at a plant, and they're like, you can't keep a schedule.
Because there are too many fires.
If you're always responding to the fires, yes, the plant manager shouldn't be. The plant manager should be, running a plant. They should have a plan. That plan should be well communicated. Again, these are just some of the basics that I think companies are missing.
Okay, so what else? What else do you think they can do?
Well, stop and think is a tool that we teach. There's a 7-second rule that we teach folks that real firefighters use. At least their leadership does. Some other tips is digging deeper. So there's a common vernacular in the business that they use in quality a lot called 5 why.
5 whys.
Yeah, 5 whys. And so we recommend you use 5 whys with behaviors. And just like the real 5 why, the biggest problem with it is people make assumptions and they jump to the first why or the second why. There's a reason they call it 5 whys.
Okay.
Building, foundations for communications. It's not just talk more. It's, learn to listen more. It's one of the oldest adages. I think it was one of the first ones that somebody taught me was, hey, we have 2 ears and, and 1 mouth, right? So listen twice as much as you try to speak, right? So measuring things and measuring the right things. I see folks talk about trust surveys, and that's a little confusing to me. Like, what is a trust survey going to produce? Why are you even doing it? And they're doing it because it's in vogue, because they, it's all over the internet. Trust surveys, and why are you actually doing the survey? What do you want the end result to be?
And you almost already know there's a problem if you're
With-
choosing to do a trust survey.
I would think so.
think
Yes, and so the trust survey is going to tell you have a problem. And creating systems that, but you can't have that system depend on one superstar employee. We have to have a system that's built for utilizing all of your leadership assets. We see that, I think they call it Pareto, right? It's 80-20 or 20-80. 20% of your people doing 80% of your work. You can't have that. That's poor leadership. Clear communication. And, oh my goodness, does that cause issues? I feel that when I use crystal clear communication, which is one of our tools, that we can get twice as much done. And folks, it's unclear communications that cause a lot of the tie-ups. It's emails and texts and unclear agreements. You can literally see hundreds of hours wasted. And again, so take it from the business perspective again, which is part of why we're doing this. You take 100 hours, 10 managers at a typical site, right? You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and that's just one group. And the funny part is, I hear people laugh about this all the time. We know it's occurring, in other words, and I think the laugh might be a nervous laugh. We don't know what to do about it, so we'll just laugh about it. But equate it to a car that gets 7 miles to the gallon versus 20, and the repair is a simple one. You should address it, and you don't. Well, I wouldn't laugh about that.
Okay.
It's real leadership isn't about grabbing answers off of a shelf. Leader is about building people and building systems that actually work. And very few companies have that.
All right. So we're getting close to the end of our time today. How about you give us some truths and wrap it up?
So some of the truths, again, is do we have a leadership, a solution? And I want to kind of think about this differently. Is there was a question I used to ask folks, and I gave up asking because I never had anyone answer it. What's your leadership culture? I started asking that question 15 years ago, and after 5 years of asking the question, probably about 500 times, no one was ever able to come back to me with an answer. That's something I want folks at home to think about, because as you're listening and thinking about that, what is your leadership culture? Because leadership sets the tone. If people are reacting, that's leadership. What's your plan? How are we following the plan? How are we not following the plan? Band-aids are easy. Foundations are hard.
Wow.
But only one of them actually works. Band-aids work on kids. Band-aids don't work in businesses. So, at Shamrock,
But they look nice.
They do, and they have some really cool Band-Aids these days. A friend of mine started a Band-Aid company that I don't want to give him free pub, but he knows he's out there, and we're thinking about him. But stop chasing moles. Stop the game. Stop the madness. Because you can build trust and stability, and that's the type of thing that you can scale as an organization.
So true. All right, so thanks, John. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into SHAM-ROCKIN. Got your own whack-a-mole story? I'm sure you do. Or maybe a time your team broke the cycle and finally solved a root cause. Tell us, we want to hear about it. And if this episode hits home, subscribe, share, and forward it to a leader who keeps reaching for the catalog instead of solving the real issue. Because until you stop treating the symptoms, the same problems will keep popping up. And trust me, you get tired of swinging that mallet. Until next time.